Hey friends, Jeff here, and welcome back for a new episode of My Impossible Podcast. Today, you get to meet another member of the Kilimanjaro team, Lauren Friedrich. Lauren has quickly become a friend and a really powerful part of my community who has routinely throughout this process come alongside me and others to make things happen for us in our fundraising and in other ways. Lauren came to us through one of our other team members who you've met on this podcast, Jay Letter. Lauren is a person of grit and perseverance and joy. When we did a Spartan race together in December in Central Florida, she literally was bouncing through the course and just brought a joy and exuberance to our team and to that whole effort. In this conversation, Lauren shares her heart of what really matters to her and her impossible. Her story as a young girl and the realization of what was going to be required of her to take on what the world was going to offer. I think you're really going to enjoy this My Impossible podcast episode with Lauren Friedrich. Lauren, it is awesome to have you. I've had you on my list of people from the team who I want to be a guest on the show. And so super excited to have you. Welcome.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. I've wanted to admittingly be a guest on the show. You've done such a beautiful thing here. So I'm honored to be here today. And thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And with that, what is your impossible?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And first of all, I think it's important for anybody to understand that impossible is impossible until it's possible, right? And as a former athlete, as a professional, I think one of the most beautiful things in the world is when somebody tells you you can't do something. And for me, that creates this level of grit and resiliency that almost wants to prove not only to others, but more so to yourself that it is possible. And so I love that this is the name of what you created and curated here, Jeff. And I feel honored to be part of something. And so when you ask me that question, it carries a lot of weight. I think it's important for so many of us to realize that our time here is fleeting and the way we spend our days is really important. And the things and the people and the time and the places you invest in is critical. So I'd say this, I've never been kind of the first picked. Growing up, I wasn't always the loudest voice in the room. I didn't have a perfect resume, but I did have grit and I did have resilience. And I had this deep need to prove something to myself and to my parents who invested so much in who I am and to my community. And I think because of that kind of grit and that subtle, resiliency I built through life, being an athlete and wanting to do things, I looked at it as kind of this underdog, right? Like not always picked first, not all of these things, but I knew deep down inside of me that I had an ability to achieve and to do things a lot of people didn't believe in. And so I think kind of that professional space that I put myself in, being a female in business, sitting at a lot of tables with people that were letter grades above me, but being capable of doing things really lended this beautiful motivation. And so I think My Impossible has been weaving this underdog mentality with doing things that people are like, holy heck. I don't know if we can swear on this podcast, but it's more of a holy SHIT moment.
Yeah, right.
People are like, you did that. And so I'll give you two examples, right? So about a decade ago, I'm very motivated by my parents. My father is a diabetic. He's a type 2 diabetic. I do a ton of work with JDRF. I do a ton of work with those charities. And I decided to run the New York City Marathon in 2018. And so I started training late 2016, realizing this would be something that was difficult, right? 26.1 miles in New York, a city I'm from. And when I started to tell a lot of people, and my mom will laugh, she texted me one day and she said, Laura, you're going to be all right. Like, can you do this? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm going to try. And so I trained, and despite travel and work and things like that, that impossible became my possible. I did the marathon. I ran with JDRF. We raised $10,000 for children with juvenile diabetes. My father was there. I had his name, on my body and on my shirt, and it felt incredible. And the community rallied against it. And so I was able to leverage that. Like, I've never done a marathon. I was, as a collegiate athlete, but I was able to do that. That then parlayed into a couple of years ago. I'm a big advocate of animals. I'm a big advocate, particularly of pit bulls. So I got very heavily involved in ASPCA and felt compelled to do an Ironman. So in 2023, I competed for an Ironman in Hawaii, a half Ironman. Let me just be clear on that. Hooked myself into ASPCA. And again, many people were like, an Ironman, which for the record is a 1.2 mile swim, a 56 mile bike, and a 13.1 mile run. And did that and hooked into the ASPCA, and we raised $8,000 for the ASPCA. So again, it was something that was impossible to me just to even conceptually think about, Jeff. And then it transitioned very quickly into something that, I did. And I'll tell you what, I came in 996 out of 1,012 people, but I still finished. And that was great. And so, I'll wrap it here by saying my next impossible is hiking Mount Kilimanjaro for something that I feel very deeply moved towards. And that's you and what you're doing. And we're going to do that in a couple of months. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah. I'm curious to take that, if you would, take us into your story. You talked about this feeling of not being picked or being the underdog and not being picked first, being overlooked. Take us into a little bit of that experience, that shape, this feeling of being an underdog.
Yeah.
When did you become conscious that because I felt very much like that, a better part of my life. And I am always curious thinking about when did that hit? When did I realize that was real, or at least real in terms of how I was conceiving of it? What was that like for you? When did you become aware of that feeling?
Yeah. I like this question a lot. I think I grew up between New York and Connecticut, and I am the youngest of three girls in a New York Italian family, also a little Irish. And so competition is just kind of naturally, I think, ingrained in our DNA. And so I remember going to grade school, and my parents were fantastic in creating a space that said you could do anything. And I remember being in grade school when we moved from New York to Connecticut, almost having this subliminal judgment. Like, you can tell that I was an outsider, I wasn't an insider. And I walked in being excited about a new experience. And I think that there was this level of outsider mentality. And I became adaptable, Jeff. But I think it was at that point when I was in probably like 9-10 years old that I realized if you tell a fish to fly, he's going to fail. But if you tell a fish to swim, he's going to prevail. And so it really allows you to either define or refine that engagement. So I think at a very young age, I was able to identify that there was this need to lean into who you are. And it took me a lot of years. I will tell you, not until I was probably in my early 20s did I feel comfortable and confident in my own skin. I think we all go through this evolution. But I think I allowed going through, as a young woman, you go through growth spurts and you go through puberty and you go through these things that you have to move through. You can't skip them. But I think it's the lessons in the failing and the judgment that allows you to become the best version of yourself. And so I vividly remember in college, I played sports my first 2 years. Junior year, I was like, I'm done. I'm hanging the cleats up. I'm not taking this thing professional. And I remember my parents, I told them I was going to go study abroad in Italy in 2005 when there was like really no cell phone still. And they kind of looked at me and they're like, I don't think that's going to happen. And I was so confident in that decision and that choice as a young adult to say, like, I've got this. I'll take care of it. I went and got my visa. I went and got my passport and took care of it. And it was like, I allowed myself to be like, don't be afraid of it. People are going to judge you good, better, and different. go have a great time. And it was the best experience of my life, was going and living in Italy for 6 months. So I think I was very aware of being the underdog at a very young age. And I'm grateful for all the lessons, the tears, the insecurities, the lack of confidence, because I think as a young adult, it's taught me invaluable lessons that some people don't get that luxury or that fortune. And I think that's why it's lended into me wanting to do work and helping others, whether it's, a chat with a young female that needs mentorship, or it's working with something that deeply, I feel moved by from a philanthropic perspective. So I think it was an evolutionary period. And I'm still today like a student of the game. I'm 40 years old, but I still find value in those lessons and being able to make positive changes in tough moments.
Yeah, you use the word, the sense of, I don't know if you said these exact words, but you chose to move beyond the fear. And that's one of the principles, if you want to call it that I talk about a lot, that fear is okay. What's not okay is to be stuck because of fear. And that is a bold, what you displayed, going to Italy to study, and then all the choices that you made, the choice to do the Ironman, which is kind of mythological, at least for us mainlanders, who only watched it on NBC on Saturday afternoons, when it's on, when the choice after choice to move beyond fear. That's really intentional. Could you talk to us again? It's not formulaic, I can imagine, because it's not formulaic for me, but what goes in those moments when fear, again, whether it's any of these milestones, any of these choices you've made, what's your approach when fear rears its head in the face of a choice to go in a particular direction?
Yeah. This is probably my favorite. And I think it's when you land on the favorable side of fear, right? Whether it's something small, you fail a test and realize you're still a student. You lose a job and realize you're still an employable professional. You lose a game, but realize you're still an athlete. I think it's all about your mentality. I've seen bad and I've seen good. I've won and I've lost. And I think it's all about choice and the mentality you flip and you frame it. I think we learn our most valuable lessons when it is unfavorable. I think if you win your whole life and you're chosen your whole life, it's hard not to appreciate the other side of the house. So I think fear, I've reframed fear in a lot of different ways, but more so to be a motivation and be an energy to change the narrative and the outcome of that story, and realize even if at the end of the day, you don't get picked, you don't get the job, you don't, take the trip, you're going to be okay. And the opportunity is going to come. Jeff, I use this term all the time. Some days you're the pigeon and some days you're the statue. I think if you level set yourself to realize that when you can celebrate the good and you can learn from the bad, it changes everything in your whole life. And when Jay and I were talking about doing this trip, the first thing I thought was, I was like, oh my goodness, we're going to climb an almost 20,000 foot mountain. And then we did that first Spartan race with you. And I saw how compelled and how focused and how unified you were as a leader and the things that you were doing in the chair. And it's just been so inspiring. So I think in this moment, and like what we're talking about today, is fear is only what you allow it to have energy for, right? And if you don't give it power, you give yourself that power and that motivation and that energy, it can really help you move through it.
I wonder, this is maybe feels like or sounds like a weird question, because it feels a little strange to me, even as I've it framed in my mind. But I think a lot of times I get concerned because people see me and doing the things I'm doing, or they hear you here in this conversation and describe in a way that you just did about, just putting yourself out there, moving past fear. And I like to remind people that I chicken out all the time. Like I bail because I'm afraid, and that's okay. It's not okay to do it all the time. It's not okay to let it define you. but I like to share with people that, yes, I'm doing something and some things that are bold and fearless. But I'm wondering in your story, if you were just pull back the curtain on when it actually you bail or it doesn't go the way you want it to. What could you just give us a peek at something like that and what went into that?
This is so ridiculous, but I'm going to like call myself out right now. You know, I am not somebody that lives my life in grand gestures or big moments. I really try to level set and ground myself in the fact that life could be as significant as I just need to take a mental health day today. Like I traveled, you and I in our prep, we were talking about like I travel a lot. And so I think listening to my body has become the most critical thing from a checkpoint in my life. So to me, like when I dip out, it's when I know I'm overstimulated, I'm overwhelmed, and I just need to take a day off. And that to me is like, I'm done. I know my body well enough. I just need to take a moment. I need to recollect and I need to move on. So last night we were, flying in from Colorado last night and we were in the airport and the airline had said like last call and I'm sprinting through the airport. I was just so tired, didn't have time to get food. And I just stopped and I was like, if I miss the flight, I miss the flight. Like I need to just take care of myself and be okay. Made the flight. I'm here today. But like, it's that something is so small. It's not about like going and, I love to skydive. It's not like I'm going in a helicopter and I chicken out, but I chicken out all the time. And I think everything's relative, Jeff, right? Like you can't say like, we're all going to be on the mountain together. And I know there's going to be a moment that somebody's lungs are going to not feel great or they're going to be lightheaded or you're going to be tired. And I think it's when you surround yourself with people that cheer you on to realize like, you're going to be all right. Take a minute, take 5, go do what you need to do. That's where I think community is so important. So like I chicken out all the time. I raise my hand and I say I can't do it. Or if there's a project that I don't have bandwidth or capabilities for, you got to take a step back and you have to know yourself and you need to know your triggers. But I think you also need to surround yourself with people that are going to say like, get up, let's go. You're going to be fine. Let's make this thing happen. So it's about individual realization, but I think it's also about community, knowing when to surround you and say like, I know you're tired. I know you're not in this right now, but your body is not quitting. So let's get up and let's go. And I think that's something that a lot of us need to be reminded of is if you don't have that advocacy behind you when your motivation kills, you need to have the discipline and the people behind you to help drive that.
You're pointing to, in a big way, the we part of the kicking on an impossible. You pointed to the community that rallied around you with the Ironman, with the New York City Marathon, your community of your family that has supported you. Could you take us a little bit into maybe the things that people don't really understand about the power of community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think again, I'm going to use the underdog term, but I think the thing about community is the investment. I think a lot of times, and this is probably a byproduct of the culture that we live in, people get very self-interested, self-invested, and they forget that it's not always about you. There's a bigger thing, and that requires a lot of effort before you see an ROI or a return on investment, right? So I'll use, for example, I am a strategic advisor for a couple of companies. It's a voluntary role. You get a great opportunity to help advise groups as they, come to market, as they grow seeds. But it could be a 2-3 year investment. But you create in that process a great community of people that you're investing in. They see where your piece is as well. But there's a lot of single or, unilateral investment that needs to happen in a community. And I think sometimes it's about zooming out. I love to use the term zooming out and realizing that like, whilst that investment might not have financial or qualitative results at the moment, it's for such a bigger and greater cause. And I'll just use, the marathon as a great point. It has been a talking point in interviews and keynote speeches I've done, in talking to people about why you make that decision. And so that equity and that value you bring from a community that you've built is so much more powerful and has such larger dividends than saying like, what am I getting out of this? And I think that too many people approach opportunities with like, what's the immediate or the, the instant gratification there. And sometimes it's got a long tail on it and you have to be patient. And so I think community is about two things. I think it's about the effort, and I think it's about really understanding what like your overall goal is, even if that goal could have a 5, 10, 20-year stretch. And so I think, I wrap it around with My Impossible and what you're doing and what you're creating. So many of us that are getting involved in this come from different communities, different parts of the country, different thoughts, different beliefs, different faiths, different families. But I think creating that community for something that's so important, Jeff, is such a conversation to have. And I know like I'll be talking about this experience, you and the team, for 15, 20 years to come. So probably a long-winded way of saying like it's a bi-directional effort, and people have to realize that you can't always have immediate ROI, and it's going to look different every time.
Yeah. I'm really resonating with that word investment. I don't think I've used that word, but we've been learning a lot. I've been learning a lot about team and about community through this process in ways that I never really, or I didn't anticipate, let's put it that way. And the piece that you're pointing to that, and that I'm resonating with a lot is the egoless, selfless investment in the cause, whatever the cause is. Could be a nonprofit, could be a for-profit, could be an individual, could be whatever. But the selfless, without regard for self. And in some cases, what we witnessed in our training is safety, even without regard for safety in the midst of a moment, potentially difficult, challenging moment. So I'm really, and it's your word of investment. It speaks to this just deep investment, because we talk about community a lot, and it's, we think it's a very loose term, community. But when the rubber meets the road, community that's going to make the impossible possible are those folks who have deeply invested in you or your cause or whatever it is that you're up to. Do you see that? Is that part of your experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I think also learns, and it's kind of a tough, probably unfavorable opinion, is you also realize who has your back in those situations, Jeff. It's funny. I'll just isolate this moment right now to the Spartan that we did in Central Florida, and like your brother was there and your nephew was there, and and there's a smaller group of us. We were going up a 20-foot A-frame cargo net, and we were getting you up and getting you down, really with just solo. You were kind of soloing, right? And I remember, Jeff, being at the top of it, and it was like, these people probably don't even know my last name, but it doesn't matter, because we are all invested to make sure that we finish the race and that Jeff is safely up and down. And that was the toughest obstacle I think all of us did. And that's just very definite. It's a very defined moment in my life, because you realize who has your back and who doesn't have your back. And I think that that's just part of growth and becoming mature in life, is that something you invest in might not be something that other people invest in, but you have to have that self-sustaining motivation to say like, hey, I'm going to invest in this, and I'm going to wrap myself around the community that's also doing that. So I don't know, that moment will stick out to me forever, is just being at the top and us just like carrying you, down that, and seeing you just like propelling yourself down this thing. And it was like in that moment that you're like, we're all here for the right reason, and we've all made this commitment and this investment, and it was a cool experience. So yeah. Then there's sometimes too, like, right, that you're like, this is not it for me. And you have to kind of just like throw your hands up and walk away and realize, like, again, time is limited. Are you investing in the right thing? So I digress.
Yeah. Lauren, I'm wondering, just you shared a lot of your story, your heart. I'm wondering whoever it might be who's listening to this episode, what's your invitation to them?
My invitation will be very consistent. It's who I am. I have it tattooed on my body. Is in life, we will be put up against a lot of impossible situations, right? You have got to be your own catalyst. You have to be your catalyst for change, for advocacy, for motivation, advocacy for doing what you know you're capable of, and even doing what you know you're not capable of. I think too many times, and it's really truly something that I live and breathe by, Jeff, is like, be an advocate for other people. If you have the means and the capability, go do it. Go be the voice, go share the knowledge. It's what I talked about in my TED Talk. It's what I hope you talk about in the things that you do. But when you think about being your own catalyst and creating community and creating good investment and creating legacies and helping other people get there, that's why I sleep well at night, is because I know I've found self-motivation and other people have picked me up in areas that I've found absolute, lack of it. So be the catalyst. That is what I will leave the conversation with today and people to walk away with.
So I'm going to ask some question I hadn't planned, because you just talked about a tattoo. And do you have a Kilimanjaro tattoo that's planned post-climb? Because I do. I have one here. It's my only one. But my forearm, I'm already designing it. Do you have a Kilimanjaro tattoo that's planned?
My God, I do not. But I think you just put something in my head, because I've got quite a few little tattoos. But it's funny, after the Ironman, people are like, "You gonna get the Ironman tattoo?" And I was like, probably not. But I might get a Kili tattoo, because I think a good mountain tattoo is what's up.
Awesome. Well, maybe as a team, we'll all come together, and those that are willing and would do it. Lauren, this is so much fun. I love your heart, and just can't wait to what's next.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for having me today. And to anybody listening, this is such a great platform. I love what you're doing, and I really appreciate you having me on today, Jeff. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.